Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Lori Conley on the podcast. She's coming to us from the West Coast, where I'm not even going to ask what the weather's like. That's normally my icebreaker, but I'm not even going to ask it because it's going to depress me because, it happens every time. But yeah, if you couldn't tell, she's a bodybuilder. I don't know. We might be talking to some people that just can't tell that. You're one of those guests where, you can kind of tell just off the bat where it's like, it's kind of not a guess thing. But yeah, she's on here to share her health and fitness journey and discuss all things health and fitness. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Lori, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Well, I ask about the weather, but like I said, I'm not even going to do that because it's just going to depress me. So to get things started, Lori, why don't you just first off give us your backstory on what inspired and motivated you to eventually become a bodybuilder and how it's led to where you're at right now?
Let's see. I think the most common thing that everyone says is I was always an athlete. So I was an endurance athlete for a long, long time, and decided that I just really wanted to. I was a cyclist, and before that, I was an equestrian. So I've always loved animals too. So that's always been my big deal. So I'm an equestrian. I went into cycling. I love cycling, but I was ready for a change. I wanted to do something. I wanted to train hard. I've always liked to train hard. I'm very goal orientated. So training hard was like my jam. And but I was ready to do something feminine too. Like I wanted to do something with some sparkles. And I don't know, just like I think the first go-to when you're a female, because I didn't know anything about bodybuilding or physique, was like, okay, I'm gonna do figure. Because they didn't have bikini and wellness when I started. But so we all they had was figure, and physique was just coming out. So and then bikini had just started like soon after that. So of course I'm like, I'm gonna start with figure, and I just started really training really hard, and I was just getting bigger and bigger because the way I like to train. So I went to my first show and I talked to it was a natural show, and I went to my first show, and the first thing he said to me is like, "You're like really kind of big for a figure," and I said, "Oh, okay. So what should I do?" He's like, "You should go into bodybuilding." And like I said, physique, they hadn't really come up with bikini and physique yet, so there was like that was it, and there wasn't. So I had the natural bodybuild for a minute because they had really gotten rid of female bodybuilding with what I mean. They executed it, and then physique came out, and I was like, okay, so I really got into physique. And then I'm like, I can do NPC, I can do physique. And then now I'm just excited because they've brought women's bodybuilding back. So all us big girls can just keep getting bigger if we want.
I always found that interesting, like how people coped back in the day when it was either like figure or bodybuilding, really, where you had to choose between the two, because it's like there's such a vast difference, especially now, between like what a figure competitor looks like as opposed to what a female bodybuilder looks like. So I always just found that interesting having to choose that. But did you have any myths or misconceptions about the sport before you got into it? Because like if you mention bodybuilding, the general public, there's so many things that people think about when they think about bodybuilding. And a lot of them, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about the sport, especially when you add the female side to it. I mean, those get multiplied by about 100. Were there any myths or misconceptions that you were concerned about? Or was it one of those things where you just wanted to dive right in and see what happens?
I think at first I was a little apprehensive about getting that going full bodybuilder, getting that full physique. So I kind of was like, I'm just going to do physique. I don't know how big I want to get. And, and then I just kind of realized I kind of just let it go. Like as I got deeper and deeper in the sport and just realized that I enjoyed training. And then I didn't really, care what other people thought of my size. And then I really didn't get a lot of negative feedback from it. Like, so I didn't really have any misconceptions about it. Just a few, like, I don't know, hang-ups in my head about what I thought was going to be too big for me. And now I'm just like, whatever. I don't know if that made sense or not.
Oh, absolutely. And what was your friends and family's reaction like when you announced them, like, hey, I want to give bodybuilding a try?
I don't think they really had a choice. I don't really have a big extensive family, so that wasn't really a problem. I think my husband was afraid. He had the misconception that I was going to start to get like masculine. You know what I mean? So he's like, he saw some of the bodybuilders who were a little bit more, and so he's like, oh God, but he realized that there's all different types of bodybuilding. When it comes down to it, it's symmetry and aesthetics. You don't have to be the biggest bodybuilder. You don't have to be the most ripped bodybuilder. It's everybody's structure is different. Every way they approach bodybuilding is different.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many different body types and different ways that, bodies react to different types of training and stuff. And on top of that, I mean, I love to talk genetics on this podcast because I hear this all the time and it makes me just want to strangle these people. Oh my God, I want to look just like her. I want to look just like that person. I want his arms. I want her abs. And it's like, you can train just as much as someone. You're not going to look like them, unfortunately. People are just born differently. I could do exactly what Jay Cutler does, and I can guarantee you I will not look probably 1/10 of the way that he looks, just because people's bodies are built differently. But on top of that, whenever you first get started working out, there's always that one body part that really, really takes off that you don't have to train as much. And then there's that one body part that just drags behind that you have to train to oblivion. What was one body part that really took off for you, and what's one body part that you've just been dragging along?
My shoulders and my back took off. Like, I'm a big shoulders and back girl. One thing I left out, I was a big climber, back in the day. So my back, and then I rode. So I was a rafting guide for a while. So I rode and climbed. So my back was naturally already kind of wide just from the sports I had done. So, and then my shoulders were wide too, but my shoulders, and that's genetic too. My dad had big arms, big back, big shoulders. So that kind of took off on me. Lagging for me is I have like long monkey arms. So, biceps, I'm always working on biceps and I like having big chest too. I like pectorials.
Hey, the gym bro in me is loving that you have to work arms all the time. Are you kidding me? That's a gym bro's dream, basically. He's like, oh, I got to work on my biceps all the time. That's a good problem to have, at least for me. At least I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, sign me up for that then. Because I've had some guests, like especially some of the figure competitors, where they're like, I have never even trained arms in like the last 3 years, and you're just like, okay, what's the point of living then, basically? Then if you can't do that, at least that's at least the gym bro in me coming out. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm 6'3", so my legs were the one area where they're just shot. Where I mean, I have made the joke I could inject pure muscle into my legs, and they're not gonna grow really that much. Calves don't even get me started. The most genetic body part that's ever existed and will ever exist. Oh God. But I mean, you did mention like I used to kayak a lot and stuff like that. And my back was the one thing that really took off for me. And that is one of the best back workouts you can ever get, is doing anything like on the water where you have to paddle or where you have to row. So if anyone out there is looking for a back workout, I always recommend if you live next to any body of water really, and you have the expenses to go and buy a kayak or something like that, or a canoe, go to town on that, because that is, yeah, you will never feel really as tired really as when you finally, get off that. But another thing that this sport, like we talked about previously before we started recording, I mean, the nutrition side of this sport is so important, but it's not talked about, I don't think, as much as it should be. What were some of the biggest nutritional changes that you made when you really started to take things seriously in this sport?
I cut out alcohol. So I took out alcohol. I took out all the crap food, which was hard for me because I'm an eater. So I was never the picky kid, which my first coach that I worked with for a long time, Baljeet Singh, he was like, it's good that you're a good eater, because I didn't have problem getting the food down. He's always said that's what made me a good bodybuilder, is I was a good eater, but it also can be a curse, as you know. It could be, it can work both ways. I think the biggest thing is when I decided that I really wanted to take it seriously. I really wanted to tighten up. And getting rid of the sugar and the alcohol was really big. And then I saw big changes just with my metabolism, with cellulite, the graininess of my skin. A lot of things changed. So, and yeah, just a higher protein diet, not being afraid of that high protein diet, eating really clean, just the discipline. I think it was also like a certain amount of discipline, how you eat, putting the food down, getting those meals in, skipping the going out to dinner, skipping the drinks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Was finding that discipline hard at first? Because so many people don't understand how minute this sport is when it comes to, like, you have to eat at this time for a lot of people, and you have to eat this much. And that's a discipline that very few people ever practice in their daily life. And when people get started in this sport, that is one of the things that takes them the most by surprise, is just how much discipline this sport requires. Was that a shock for you, or was it something that you didn't really struggle? Because I have some freaks on here who are like, no, the discipline didn't bug me at all. And I'm like, okay, well, why aren't you like in the military or something like that then,
Yeah.
basically? But so was that ever a struggle with you, or were you someone who always kind of like went good with a disciplined lifestyle?
No, I struggled with it at first. I think your first show is always your hardest. I think that first cut is always your hardest because you're like, oh my god, how am I ever gonna do this? But as my brain is more used to me doing it, I think every show, the more shows you do, I think almost it gets easier. The discipline gets easier because now it's like I know it's not permanent. I think the first time you prep for a show, there's this thing like it's never going to end. And now my brain's like, oh, this is only going to be 15 weeks. I can do anything for 15 weeks, right? And then I think what surprises people the most, and what surprised me the most, is how much food I can eat and how you can eat a steak, and half a dozen eggs. I'm talking off season, like when I'm building, and still maintain a really nice tight physique. Like even when I'm off season and I'm saying rather, we're trying not to get like crazy looking, but to people are just like the amount of food you eat is surprising if you're eating the right food and you're utilizing it correctly and you're eating the meals when you're supposed to eat the meals. But cutting is always hard. That last 8 to 12, anyone who tells you that's like, there's a point at which your brain figures out what you're trying to do. Like, like your brain's like, hey, what are you doing?
That is the most impressive part about the sport to me, is like, yeah, those last few weeks when your body is just doesn't, that's the whole mind over matter thing that really is just so impactful in this sport. And that dedication, that determination that a lot of people develop as a bodybuilder, have you been able to transfer that into other aspects of your life? Like a lot of people I know, like they take it into their jobs and it helps them out. Have you been also able to transfer those traits that bodybuilding can give a person and use it to better your, other than your life, other than bodybuilding as well?
Yes, I think that definitely the discipline of having to do things like, I go to the gym hell or high water. I've given up. There's a point at which I know some days I'm not going to have a great workout. I don't feel like working out. I don't feel like training. I go in and get it done. I know what I need to do and I get it done. That's why I think you get really like good at accomplishing tasks. You do the next right thing. I get what needs to be. You can transfer that into any part of your life. Um, you know, Bodybuilding is really about consistency and sacrifice. And it's something that I don't think our society is really into right now. You know what I mean? But it just makes things like, okay, so I can sacrifice some things, and like consistency is key, and you just keep moving forward. I don't know if I'm making sense.
You're making 100% sense. I mean, I'm one of the last of the millennials. I'm 28, so I'm like, it's like the second to last year that you could ever be a millennial. But yeah, my generation, everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday. So if any of them were to try bodybuilding, they just want those results overnight, which is, it's not going to happen, which is another great thing about this sport, is like, that's why not everyone can do it. I mean, it takes people decades sometimes to even build up the physiques that they have. I mean, it's not going to happen to you overnight. And again, if it does happen to you overnight, give me a call, because I will spend my entire life savings to train with you then, because you have found the secret that everybody and their brother has been looking for, for all time. So yeah, there's,
Does that you hit on that, and that is one thing I miss. It does really develop a sense of patience, because it definitely is a consistency and patience. You don't build a physique. The muscle that you have the year before matures, and then you put more muscle on that, and it's like it's definitely a marathon. It's not a sprint. And sometimes I think that's why you don't. Bodybuilding. It's a hard sport to do, because you really have to be consistent and patient.
how far do the eyes roll in the back of your head when you hear people say like, oh, I don't want to get too bulky, I just want to get toned and stuff, especially people when they first get started, because that's the one thing that drives me crazy.
Um, I don't roll too much. I understand how people feel, but the time and energy and food and money that you spend to look like this, people just don't want to do. They don't want to do the work. Well, I think it was Ronnie Coleman that used to say, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, so you got to do bodybuilding. Right? And then all of a sudden it's like, I've literally had that conversation with people. People are like, how do you look like that? How do you get like that? And you start to tell them, and they're like, never mind, I'm good.
I learned that the hard way, everyone. I told her my story before we started recording the podcast. So yeah, I learned that the hard way, where it's like, yeah, I'm one of those people where it's like, yeah, I wish I could have that body, but again, my stomach just doesn't have the dedication that my mind does. And that's, yeah, there's, maybe one of these days, I'll put off a little bit of the COVID weight that I put on, and we'll get to that. So who knows with that? But I mean, we talked a little bit about this too before we got started. I mean, it's the hardest thing for so many guests that I have on, and I would have never guessed it in a million years before I started this podcast, is posing. If you were to tell me what is the hardest out of posing, working out, and nutrition, I probably would have said, before I started this podcast, I would have said probably nutrition, and then I would have said the working out and then posing. But ever since I've talked to, like hundreds of bodybuilders, I have come to learn that for so many people it is the hardest thing. What has your relationship with posing been like?
Better since I have my coach, Monty. I have my coach, Monty Spicer, is a great poser. He was a great bodybuilder in his day, and he's an awesome poser, which is how I got introduced to him. But yeah, posing to me is just it's the hardest thing. You could have the best physique in the world. You could have the best nutrition. I could go out and train like a demon every day and eat all my meals. But if you do not know how to pose, if you do not know how to hide your flaws and accentuate your positives, if you can't pull off your mandatories, you work all year to basically be on stage for maybe a total of 3 minutes. So you need to be on point that whole time you're on stage. Like, everything has to be like on point. And as soon as the one thing is a little difficult about bodybuilding is you're not in peak shape all year. So it's hard to pose. It's off season posing is never fun. It's just like, oh, but you got to do it. You got to keep it. And also with bodybuilding, you need to pose in the muscle. So your body you need to start posing as soon as you start getting into that prep phase, because you pose in that muscle, you pose in that food. A lot of people don't catch on to that. They start posing like 3 weeks out. That's not how it works. You need to start as soon as you start to lean out just a little bit, man. You hit I'm posing like 2 or 3 times a day after all my meals, trying to work out the kinks,
Yeah, most people do not understand too that it's more of a workout than a lot of your workouts, just going through your posing routine, because the human body is not meant to be in that flexive a state for that long a period of time. How long does it really take you before you develop that mind to muscle connection and sort of that durability that it requires to, because sometimes you're on stage for, minutes at a time posing, and the average person would not be able to do that.
So I like to work on my endurance. So that's another reason that I do off-season posing, even though doesn't make me feel better about myself. But you got to work on that endurance. I do posing sessions when I'm getting close to shows. I will pose about 45 minutes a day in the morning, and then maybe another half an hour or so in the afternoon with my coach. And because you really want to work on that, you want to be able to control your breathing, and you have to work on that endurance. You don't want to be up there shaking. You're supposed to, even though it's the hardest thing, you're supposed to get up there and make it look effortless. And so conditioning is a big part. That's another reason that I do a certain amount of cardio in my off season, because you just want to keep a little bit of that fitness. You need to keep a little bit of that endurance going, and then start posing.
Out of the poses that you do, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
Well, of course, I'm a back girl, so I like a back girl. I do like side chest, because side chest is like one of my favorite poses. Let's see, back. Maybe like a front double bicep. But yeah, side chest is just a fun pose, because you kind of get to show everything. You get to bend down, you get to tilt, you get to show your biceps, you get to show your chest, you get to drop the hamstring and show the glute, and it's just kind of a fun kind of.
Well, and again, most people don't understand, like, yeah, you are flexing your entire body. Most people, when they think of like a front double bi, they just think, oh, you're flexing the bis, or they think about back, you're just flexing your back. It's like, no, you got to time it up with every body part in your body. And that's another thing that, a lot of people, when they first get started in this, they aren't aware of that, because it's one of the little things about this sport that most people just don't understand. And when all those little things, to me at least, add up and make this sport, as hard as it is, because it's just all the little things that need to be, in place. And when you're walking on that stage, what is that moment like for you when you finally get to show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months on? What is that feeling like for you?
I'm always excited. Like, by then I've picked my music. and my suit's on point. And I always just go out there like, I'm gonna bring it. Like, I'm gonna give these people a show. Like, people come to see a show. They come to see big, beautiful, muscular. They want to see a show, So I try to bring something. I always try to work on something different. I always try to make sure music's on point, and I like to, bring something different with the hair, and of course you want to bring the best conditioning and your posing and everything. But by the time I'm hitting the stage, I'm just like, I'm ready. To me, I have a good time. It's fun. I don't really get nervous. I'm a prepper. Like, I'd be a great doomsday prepper. I'm a preparer. I'm a planner. I'm not a wing it girl. So I like to. By the time I get up there, man, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
I was gonna say, like, out of like the 400 bodybuilders that I've interviewed, I'd say only a handful of them are probably like those wing it people. When that is a special type of person, especially for body. Like, you have to be that sort of type A personality if you want to be a bodybuilder. You're not going to be successful, and it's just going to make life so much harder on you if you're not like that, where everything's prepared and everything, is good to go. And
one thing though is I'm always prepared for everything to fail. So I always assume that will go wrong, can go wrong. Because my last, I had some major, like I had a defective button. My number kept popping off in every direction. I had clear straps on my suit. I had a suit failure. So you have to be like, yes, you're completely prepared, but you have to be like, ready to like be on the fly too. Because like, I never assume that the music's going to be right or whatever. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. So I kind of get into this spot like, okay, I'm prepared, but I'm also prepared if everything goes wrong.
That's one thing that I've learned as well doing this podcast, is like I told her before, everything has gone wrong on this podcast. And even though things are running somewhat smoothly now, and I say somewhat because I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to say that things are running perfect, because they aren't, because again, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to throw that out there. I'm not jinxing it, knock on wood, everyone, we didn't, nothing bad's happened yet. So yeah. So, I have learned that, everything can go wrong, will go wrong. Absolutely. But now we go to my favorite question to ask. What is your go-to post-show meal?
Burger and fries. I love a burger and fries.
Any particular place?
Anything that's open at 10 after I get off stage.
That's another thing that shocked me too, is like how early these things start and how late they go. It's like you're there the whole day.
Oh yeah, it's you have to have the stamina, man. You have to have the will. You have to have you have to really love it. Like I don't complain about it. I always look at it like I signed up for it. So and I love it. So I don't know. So you just go through the whole day, and I hope that something's open. It has a burger and fries. Like, I got really lucky in Pittsburgh. The Hard Rock Cafe was right next door. So boom.
That is a great place. And I mean, one of the things that also isn't talked about as much is just post-show blues. Most people don't understand, like you said, that you're not going to look like this 24/7. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And I mean, some people try to do it. And, it's, first of all, people will understand you're not your healthiest when you step on that stage. But what was that like when you first realized that, like, hey, no matter how hard I work on this physique, like, I'm not going to be able to maintain it? And has it gotten easier for you to accept that as your career in the sport has gone on?
Well, yeah, because I think when you do your first show, when you do your first shows, you come off and you don't know anything about reverse dieting. And so you kind of just go for it. It's a free for all. And that can work against you, especially as you get older. So like the one year I was qualifying, I did my regional qualifier, and then I went straight into nationals. So I did 2 shows back to back. So that was a long, extensive dieting for me. And I've actually felt I came into nationals a little flat, but I was just, when I got out of those shows, I was just like, I did not reverse diet well. And so I paid for it on my next prep. My next prep was harder than it should have been. And you're dealing with aspects of that. So, and I totally lost track. Sorry.
No, not a problem. Hey, I get these.
You see the little birds come out because they just like.
I mean, I'm so used to talking to bodybuilders that are on prep brain, so it just becomes like second nature for me. Where I just like I understand that. And I lose track of things. You can tell with my ADD that I've probably already revealed to you just from talking to you that, like, yeah, I can get lost at track of time. It's not a problem.
Ask me.
Oh, just about prep brain. Like, how have you accepted that? Yeah, going on and stuff like that. How it's gotten easier, and you answered it. Yeah, so yeah, you did it.
prepping for me is I don't get like angry or mad.
Yeah.
I'm more of like I'm just like I am. I just I like in my head I think everything's great, and then it takes me 2 hours to find my car keys. I'm like,
I've had times where I was so tired, not just prep brain, but like that I had my car keys in my hand for like 15 minutes and I didn't even realize that they were in my hand. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they're yeah.
Or you just laying in bed because you're just like I'm just gonna go to sleep at 5 because I can't do anything else. So
Well, I was gonna ask it later, but you brought it up. So what is your sleep schedule like? Because when you become a bodybuilder, I mean, your sleep schedule is already going to be whack enough as it is just before you even get ready for a show. But like once you're getting ready for a show, people don't understand that there is a certain condition that you can be in where it's like you are so conditioned that and you're so tired that you can't fall asleep. And that seems kind of like an oxymoron, but it is true. So how do you deal with your sort of bipolar sleep schedule that goes along with competing?
just accept it. I think you just get to a point where you're like 10 to 6, you start getting that 10 weeks, 8 weeks. It's like you're just like, okay, this is what it is. This is how it's gonna be for like the next 5 weeks. A friend of mine who does Albert IV, who does I do IVs when I'm getting prepping. I get just so I have fluids, potassium, stuff like that, because your diet's starting to get so limited. So just to keep me healthy. And he was just saying that, it's almost impossible not to get insomnia because your cortisol levels drop, your blood sugar drops so low, and then your cortisol levels go up, and which wake you up. So that kind of gave me an understanding. I think once I understood what was going on with my body physiologically, it was easier for me to kind of lay there and accept, like, okay, this is part of the process. It's not permanent. It's only for like the next 4 or 5 weeks, and then I'll be eating a little bit more normal, and I could sleep again and stuff. But yeah, it is nice when you get back into those normal sleep patterns. But yeah, prep sleep was just like the worst.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked about before because you were an equestrian, then you did cycling, and I love going on bike rides myself, but I hate cardio more than life itself. And when I say cardio, I mean like actual running. I go for walks, 4 to 5 times a week just because I enjoy it. But what is your relationship like with cardio? Because you mentioned you even do it during your off season, but is it one of those things that is it a love hate thing? Because like unfortunately, when you become a bodybuilder, you sign a deal with the devil when it comes to cardio.
Oh, so yeah, I always laugh because when I used to train for cycling, I would train like 4 or 5 hours a day on my bike. Like, so when I first started doing cardio with bodybuilding, I was like, oh, this is no big deal. I can blow this out, right? And I did for like the first year or so. But now I'm just like every other bodybuilder. It's hilarious. So I think you just like you run out. I mean, you have no favorite song anymore. You run out of podcast. You've been enlightened and motivated, and he's just yeah, you just get it done. It's part of the process. You just know toward the end, it's like that's another thing too. That's another reason that I'm a really big believer in of having a really on point off season, not letting things get out of control, because that is when your prep gets really hard too. It's like you're trying to pick up the slack by doing cardio, and if I had just maintained a little tighter over off season, I wouldn't be hanging on to the stair stepper like this 40 minutes twice a day.
The same thing happened to me during COVID a little bit where I ran out of movies to watch. So it got to the point where I was like, what can I do? What I literally did. So like the first 90 days I was on the treadmill for, like probably like 60 of them and I ran out of free movies that were on like my HBO and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, what do I do? Cause like I'm a huge movie guy myself. So I've already seen, a great chunk of movies, but yeah, that was a problem with me. And then I ran out of TV shows like a month later and then I was like, great. So what can I do now? So then, yeah, I just started listening to stuff, and there are some podcasts that I've listened to that like I can go word for word of what they're saying because I've listened to it like 7 or 8 times. But yeah, that was the COVID stories right there. But that was how did you as a bodybuilder deal during the COVID time? Because the moment that the gym started to shut down and everything, I was thinking to myself like, oh God, some of my guests, some of them might die. Like I don't know like how they're gonna cope with this.
Well, it really sucked because I had been training really hard, and I had done well at a couple NPC shows, so I was ready to rock and roll. Okay, and I'm 50 plus, so I'm not like I can't just sit around like a 20-year-old for 2 years and put on muscle. Like oh screw it. I'm like I got things to do. I'm kind of in a hurry, and so I was like and then they started like, oh, it's going to be 3 weeks and 21 days. And then so I was very lucky. I was pretty upset at first because the whole gym thing. I'm like, they don't understand the way they just destroyed things. The way they didn't realize, some people, the gym is their job. They're like, oh, just all the gym rats aren't going to be able to go to the gym for a couple weeks. No, you are ruining people's careers. People who work at the gyms, own the gyms, and train at the gyms. So they were kind of flippant about that. I was very lucky that at that point in being an athlete, I knew enough people in the industry who were like me, who we just started putting paper up on the windows. We started going to there were times during COVID that I
I
was
love how
going to,
gyms basically became like speakeasies, basically.
yeah, no, I'm serious. There was a point where I set my alarm, and my coach at the time was like, "Okay, you're gonna meet me at the gym at like 2 a.m. and we're gonna do a full body workout for like an hour, like 45 minutes to an hour," because they had us thinking we were all gonna go to jail or something for going to the gym. I know, I still want to slap somebody for that. That they did, like they made us like. So yeah, there were times where like I was going to the gym at 2 a.m. I was going to the gym at 4 a.m. I mean, whoever would turn a key for me and let me in the gym. But I was really lucky that I had enough people that I knew that they were either not closing down their gyms, they refused to close down their gyms, or they would, we would all pile in there in the middle of the night.
And people wonder why America got even fatter during COVID when they're closing down everything like they did and stuff like that. But that's a whole different topic for a whole nother podcast, because like we said before, I could get into that for like 10 hours with you. But I mean, let's also be completely honest. You're not the average looking 50-year-old woman. I've had probably about a handful of guests on the podcast that are your age that look like you do. So it's very, very rare. And if you were to walk outside, dressed the way you are going to get stares. It's like being a mini celebrity, where it's just when people see something that's not of the normal, they just say like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." And it's just human nature to stare at something that's just, not that you don't see every day. So how do you deal with that? And has it gotten easier as you've gotten more and more into this lifestyle to sort of accept the fact that you are going to get stares? Or is it still one of those things where you're just like, okay, this is kind of weird?
Actually, no. I get so much positive. Like, people are always like super positive with me that it's kind of reaffirming a little bit. Like, you work so hard, and bodybuilding can be kind of a lonely sport. It's hard to have workout partners who aren't at your caliber. The way you eat, I'm not hanging out at Buffalo Wild Wings drinking, Long Island with the gang, and doing that kind of stuff. So it's nice to go out and have people appreciate the way you look.
Is there one story that sticks out the most to you of someone who's like giving you a compliment or done anything? Because everyone sometimes talks about like all the bad stuff that goes like to the bad comments, but I always love to say, like, is there one moment that really just sticks out to you that's really positive?
There's so many. I can't think of one in particular. It's always cute when the kids think you're a superhero.
That's the funniest thing, because the kids don't have a filter, so they're the ones that'll be the most honest to you.
Yeah, mom is honest. She looks like a superhero, and I just always laugh.
Yeah.
But I always, I think the most affirming for me is when women get excited to see you. They're like, "Oh my god, you look so great! Oh my god, you look great!" And that to me is like really affirming. You know what I mean? Because you know
Yeah.
that's always nice to hear.
And I think it has really been changing. A lot more people are getting into bodybuilding. It's slowly taking off as a sport. But I mean, being that you also, you're a bodybuilder, and, the Arnold has announced again, that it's cutting more divisions again. What has been your reaction to that? Because like they're even cutting figure now, which is like, that was the division that you were going to start off in basically. And I just find it so fascinating now. It's like, are they going to cut everything now? It's like, are no women going to be able to compete in the Arnold anymore?
Well, I just think that, and this is like, I don't know, I'm probably going to get in trouble with this, but who cares? Lee Priest says what he wants anyway.
Oh no, I saw that you did the Lee Priest thing, and I agree with him 100%.
He has a really good point, and I just don't, I don't comment on everything because it's just I'm focused on bodybuilding, but he was like, it's really kind of, that whole show, every dollar that's made was built off the back of bodybuilding and a bodybuilder. So I get that, it's a machine now. You know what I mean? I wonder how much. I won't even get into it, but it basically comes down to that whole show is built off bodybuilding and the reputation of bodybuilders and bodybuilding.
Well, yeah, it's named after the guy who's probably done more to the sport than anything else. Like when people think about bodybuilding, most of the normal people, they think about like Arnold Schwarzenegger, basically.
Yeah. So that's kind of just like, that's where I'm gonna like. That's how I feel about it. But I also, at this point, it's a juggernaut. It's a money making machine. Arnold. How much control does Arnold actually even have over it anymore?
Probably nothing. It's probably just his name, basically, that they just use, and then they're just like, yeah, do that. So, but yeah, I mean, it is disappointing, but I'm glad it's still in the Olympia and it's all in all those other events. So I don't know what's gonna happen, but
like Center Podium, who have Legion Sports Fest,
yeah,
who are they're all about women's physique, women's figure, and I love to see that become a bigger, and he's really great. And then you have Jake Wood, who bought the Olympia. So you've got Wings of Strength. So I'm just, it's such a blessing that he bought the Olympia and is doing what he is doing with Wings of Strength and stuff because, wow, yeah, there wouldn't be a lot of us left.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is a question that I just came up with, about 50 podcasts ago. It shows how good of a host I am that it only took me about 500 guests before I finally realized to ask this question. But even I think this to myself every time I have a bodybuilder on or just a health and fitness guest who gets really into the sport. Just the human nature in me. Why do they do this to themselves? Why do they put themselves through this? I've talked to enough of them where I realize the case, but like even when you're talking about your lack of sleep and just all the stuff that goes on your prep, like just the human in me is just like, why do they do this to themselves? Now I know why it is, but what is your why? Because I bet if you were to tell me that you don't think that at least, a dozen times during every prep, I would agree with you, but I'd deep down be like, okay, she's lying. I'm just going to accept it though, because she's the guest and I'm trying to be polite, but like you even think that to yourself, it's probably the fact. And I mean, you're probably going to have still like friends or people around you that just tell you like, Lori, why do you do this to yourself? What is your why? How do you like to respond to them when they say that?
I constantly ask myself that question. There's certain points where I think like, God, this is the most selfish sport because like you kind of isolating a little bit, and with the diet and everything, you're getting up at 4 a.m. doing check-ins for your coach, posing, and I'll absolutely lay there and ask myself, why are you doing this? What motivates you? I'm not sure I can really answer that question. I think, like I said, I'm a goal oriented.
Well, I can say she's 50 plus years old and look at her. That's probably motivation enough as it is.
Oh, thank you. But I think it was, first of all, I was so, okay, I want to be a bodybuilder. And then it was like, okay, well, I want to win a show. And then I want to nationally qualify. And then I'm nationally qualified. And I'm like, okay, now I want to go to nationals. And then I did really good. I think that was a big motivator for me. I think if I had gone nationals and gotten like 15th or 20th and I was like, whatever, maybe I would have been like, I'm too old for this. But when I rolled up and I was like first, second, third, first, second, I was like, okay, I'm kind of good at this. And that was motivation. Being around motivating people. So being around those people who are like, you're very competitive. You've got it. My first coach was always like, you have a pro physique. He always told me I had a pro physique. My coach now, Monty Spicer, same thing. He's just like, he wouldn't even fooled with me if he knew I wasn't serious. So I just think it's like, once you get to that level, I'm like, okay, well, what's the next level? What's the next level? So now I'm just like, I'm going to see if I can do it.
Yeah, that is great. And I mean, I love to talk positives and negatives too on the podcast. So what is one thing that you don't like about being an older competitor? What's the hardest thing about being an older competitor? And what's one way that being an older competitor is actually a benefit?
Okay, my number one fear is being an older competitor is I know that physiologically, how much and how long can I put on muscle? So I have this fear in the back of my head, like, can I keep doing this? But my genetics and the way I work and the people I'm working with seems to be moving along.
I've had 60-year-olds that still put on some size. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like the deep, weird fear in my head, like physiologically, I'm just not going to be keep up with a girl who is going to be younger. She can be able to stack on more muscle. Second half of the question was,
what's one benefit that you think about being an older competitor?
Oh, quality of the muscle, my muscle maturity, my density. The fact that I've been an athlete so long, and that even when you're doing a regular sport, I would be off season in the weight room. You know what I mean? And then so once I got serious, and that just I have that muscle density. Like when you look up there, I have mature muscle, and I like that. It's cool. It's cool when people look at you and give you compliments on muscle density and muscle maturity and quality.
I know this is one of those rare sports where as you get older, you actually get better at it. Most sports, like you peak in your late 20s and then it just goes, slowly downhill from there until you reach about, your late 30s. And then it's time to, give it up. With bodybuilding, it seems like it just gets better and better because your muscle gets hardened, it gets more mature, and, it's better definition, absolutely. But I mean, out of all the things that the sport does and this sport is, I mean, the biggest thing to me is just that mental change that happens when you become a bodybuilder. What has this journey been like for you mentally? Because we talked about the dedication and stuff, but that mental, I mean, just the thoughts that you get when you're doing that cardio and you're on that last, 15 minutes of it, or you're just training and you're 2 weeks out. What has this mental journey been like for you? Because that is 100% more impactful than any of the physical changes that will happen to you in this journey.
I think I have become more confident, but a different kind of confidence, not like arrogant or like I'm better than everybody else, but this deep confidence that comes from achieving a really hard goal. You know what I mean? From working hard for years and seeing it pay off dividends. You know, when the first time when I went to work with Center Podium, because I like to keep, I also want to keep giving back to the sport. I want to promote the sport. I'm really into athletes like Andrea Shaw and, you know, a lot of the physique competitors who are just promoting the sport, you know, and they go out there and they're just good faces. So I did some work with Center Podium for Tahoe show, and you know, and you hear and you people are recognizing you for the work you've done. They're like, oh, that's the new IFB pro, Lori Conley, and you're like, I'm not being, you know, and just being like, wow, okay, so people are starting to recognize my work. Having your work recognized is really cool. That's a really cool feeling.
I had Andrea Shaw on like 2-3 months before she won her first Olympia, and I could tell like ahead of time. I was like, yeah, she's gonna be something special. She's one of those that you could just tell. And speaking of, just the field of bodybuilding, female bodybuilding is so, I think, unique in the fact that the camaraderie between the competitors is something that doesn't really happen in most sports. Like the competitors generally care about each other, and it's sort of, there's like a sisterhood that sort of develops, and a lot of them, like I've heard so many positive stories about just how nice everyone is and how everyone seems to get along, and it's very rare in sports. How important is that to you, knowing that like you have so many friends that really care about you in the sport in general, and like when you step on stage, a lot of them are your friends.
Yeah, you know, it is really cool. It is a deep sisterhood because you know everybody is out there working hard. You know, when you're getting into physique, figure, you know, bodybuilding, like we all know at that level the amount of sacrifice that everyone has put into it. Like you're not like looking at someone and going, oh, whatever. You know, you're like, wow, that person. We're all working our buns off to be at this level, and so there's a deep respect for everybody on that stage, you know, and I love that feeling that like I can just ask someone for help. Like if I'm having a suit malfunction or, you know, I've got something going on, it's either the people who are running the shows or the girls who are backstage with you. Someone's always going to help you. Like I never go into a show and if something goes wrong, I know that someone's going to like be cool. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. It's good to see women like helping each other and supporting each other.
That was the one thing that I took away when I went to my first bodybuilding show about a month ago. And it was, yeah, just how supportive and how everyone really does seem to, care about each other. But now the two questions before we wrap things up. I mean, if someone were to walk up to you and say, Lori, we made a decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
That's a really hard question. There's so
You can do more than one if you have more. Absolutely.
I don't really think I would change anything.
You wouldn't change the prize money?
Well, that always would be great, but I don't do it because of prize
Yeah.
money. You know what I mean? If I get that question a lot actually. Like people, I call them kind of the silent haters. They always are like, "So what are you going to get out of this? Is there any money in bodybuilding?" And it's like, honey, if there's money in bodybuilding, I would have quit. You know, if I was in this for the money, I would have quit after my first show.
That to me is what makes this sport so special, is that they do it for, and it's not that much financial. I mean, you basically have to win the Olympia or be in like the top 3 to really break even really for the year. That to me is one of the most impressive things other than the diet, is like how little financial gain is it, where it means that these people are truly doing it for the love of the sport.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I wouldn't really change anything. I couldn't think of anything out the hat because, to be honest, like you know, everybody approaches the sport in such a different way, and I think people, as long as people are, I think longevity, being safe and healthy. You know, you don't want to do things that are going to jeopardize your health and safety. So that would be the only thing, and getting and making sure that the people who you're in the hands of, be it a coach or whoever's mentoring you in the sport, make sure they truly care about you and your health. That's the only thing.
That is something that needs, especially after last year when all those deaths happened and everything really seemed to change the sport. That's one thing that I love to talk about, as well, is that, yeah, make sure that you find a good coach, because
But even that, I mean, your coach could be giving you great advice, but if you're not following
yeah,
it, or you're not doing what he said,
Mm-hmm.
you can, that's what I'm saying. So people need to have personal responsibility for what they're doing too, and their health and safety.
Again, personal responsibility, not something that a lot of people have these days, so it's a rare trait to have.
Yeah, and if you're an elite athlete, in any sport, you're going to do whatever it takes to win.
Yep,
You know,
absolutely.
even in baseball, it's you're going to do. So you're not going to tell an athlete who's at a certain level to like, oh, so just
I know. I absolutely, I 100% agree. I mean, look at baseball in the 90s. That's all I got to say, really, basically. And look at Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds, and it's like, yeah, are you kidding me? Yeah. So, yeah, first of all, Mark McGwire could have competed in a bodybuilding show in the offseason if he wanted to. The fact that he didn't hit 200 home runs a year is the most shocking thing to me. I mean, when you look that huge, it's like, that's the biggest mystery to me personally. But I mean, Lori, I would love to have you on in a year just to give us an update on, what you've been up to. What would you like to have achieved in bodybuilding, or just in your overall life as well? Where would you like to be at a year from now when we have you back on?
oh my gosh, I would love to. So my bucket list, of course, I would love to be on the Olympia stage, or I would love to, represent Wings of Strength, represent women's bodybuilding. I also have heard a rumor that they're bringing the Masters Olympia back. So of course, I think like any bodybuilder, to be on that Olympia stage, to be invited to a women's bodybuilding championship like the Rising Phoenix would be, yeah, but we'll see. I gotta keep working. Just keep working.
Absolutely. And I mean, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Um, Actually, I'd just like to give a shout out to my coach Monty Spicer, and of course, to, my husband, because they take so much.
I've always said they are the unsung heroes of this podcast, the significant others of the guests, because they deal with everything. Yeah, they
The
deserve
fam- the family takes the brunt.
they deserve half of that trophy, in my opinion, honestly, or maybe 1/3. The competitor still puts in the work, so they deserve like 2/3 of the trophy. But the family, they deserve about 1/3 of it. So, yeah, that is a big thing as well. And I mean, again, everyone, go and give Lori a follow. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. Buyer beware, you will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating all those Twinkies. I mean, she's 50 plus years old, for God's sakes, and it's just inspiring. But again, Lori, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. It was an absolute delight to talk to you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. This is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.